Hi there, I'm Renos Vakis, lead economist at the World Bank, and your host for Accelerating Development Ideas for Impact. This is not your typical podcast. It's an AI powered conversation brought to you by the World Bank Institute for Economic Development, where we unpack the latest research with one goal in mind, turning big ideas into real world impact. Let's get started.
Thank you for the introduction, Rinos. Recall those fitness trackers we all wear. We can get so focused on hitting 10,000 steps a day, the easy number to count, that we forget to check if we're actually getting enough sleep, which is harder to measure, but maybe even more important. It seems governments can fall into a similar trap.
That's the perfect analogy. And in this second episode of our Government Analytics Handbook series, we are diving deep into that exact problem. In our last episode, we talked about the promise of government analytics. But today, we are looking at what happens when the data itself, or how it's used, leads us down the wrong path. We are drawn from part 2, Foundations of Government Analytics, of the Government Analytics Handbook to explore this.
Exactly. So, how do we make sure we're measuring what truly matters? And once we have that data, how do we ensure it actually gets used to solve problems?
It comes down to two big ideas. First, you need what the research calls a balanced data suite, which avoids the pitfalls of simplistic measurement. And second, you need a very deliberate strategy to encourage the purposeful use of that information.
Okay, let's start with those pitfalls. I've heard the phrase, what gets measured gets managed, but the material we're looking at adds a pretty stark warning to that.
It does. A more accurate version is what gets measured gets managed even when it's pointless and even if it harms the organization's purpose. This creates some serious risks.
Like creating a false sense of success?
Precisely. Take the public financial management reforms in Malawi. For years, projects were rated as successful because they were tracking easy-to-measure things, like how much hardware was bought or if new software was installed.
So they were measuring the form, but not the actual function.
Exactly. Nearly 70% of the metrics tracked changes in form, not whether the country's budget was actually getting better. This created an illusion of success that completely masked the deep-rooted problems that later exploded in the Cashgate corruption crisis in 2013.
Wow, so the data was actually hiding the truth. That reminds me of another, more recent example from the outline, the pandemic preparedness rankings.
Yes, this one is fascinating. In October 2019, the Global Health Security Index ranked the United States and the United Kingdom as the most prepared countries in the world for a pandemic. They measured technical things, infrastructure, expertise, labs.
Things that are easy to count. And we all know how that turned out.
We do. A later analysis in The Lancet looked at 177 countries and found those preparedness indices were, and I'm quoting here, not meaningfully associated with lower infection or death rates during COVID-19.
So what did matter?
Harder to measure things. The analysis found that trust in the government and less government corruption had a much stronger, statistically significant link to lower infection rates. For many of our listeners, these issues are not abstract policy debates. They shape daily life and work.
That's an incredible insight. It also sounds like there's another risk, where measurement actually becomes a substitute for real management.
Yes, it's when the work that produces measurable outcomes starts to push out the important work that doesn't. A stark example comes from the UK's national health system. They introduced competition between hospitals to improve waiting times.
And I assume the measured waiting times got better?
They did. But that intense focus on one metric led to a substantial increase in the death rate for patients after emergency heart attacks. A metric that wasn't being tracked and was therefore neglected.
That's appalling. You think you're improving the system, but you're actually causing harm.
It's a classic perverse incentive. We see it in a Nigerian health program too. It rewarded states for improving on 6 key health indicators. So what did frontline staff do? They focused on easy wins, like handing out vitamin supplements, instead of the harder, more critical goals like reducing maternal mortality.
Okay, so this really clarifies the problem. Let's get to the turning point here. How do policymakers avoid these traps? You mentioned a balanced data suite.
This is the way forward. It's about combining different types of evidence to really understand what's going on. A key part of this is embracing qualitative data. It can tell you why something is or isn't working.
So, not just the numbers, but the stories behind them.
Yes, for example, a randomized control trial of a pro-democracy program in rural India found on average no mean impact, zero. But a qualitative study done alongside it uncovered the real story.
And what was that?
The average of zero was masking huge variation. The program worked really well for groups that had strong support, but it was actually harmful for groups facing deep local inequalities. The numbers alone missed that completely.
So, the final piece of this solution must be about protecting space for human judgment, right? Recognizing that not everything that matters can be measured.
Absolutely. There's a brilliant quote from management theorist Henry Mintzberg that sums it up. If you can't measure it, you'll have to manage it. If you can measure it, you'll especially have to manage it.
I like that. So, once you have this balanced set of data, the next challenge is getting people to actually use it. The outline mentions that just having the data doesn't guarantee it gets used.
That's the critical next step. Some of our audience working in government or development may recognize these challenges immediately. The research identifies 4 ways performance information gets used in government.
Okay, so there's purposeful use, which is the goal, using data to learn and make better decisions. Then there's passive use, just doing the minimum for compliance.
Right. Then there's political use, where data is cherry-picked to make an agency look good. And the most dangerous is perverse use, where intense pressure leads to gaming the system or even manipulating the data.
So, how do you push organizations toward purposeful use?
You have to measure it. The US Government Accountability Office, or GAO, is a great model. They've been regularly surveying federal managers for decades to track how performance data is being used.
So, they're conducting analytics on the government's analytics. That's clever.
It is, and their long-term data shows what really drives purposeful use. 2 things stand out: leaders who actively engage with the data and establishing high-quality organizational routines like quarterly data-driven progress reviews.
That makes sense. Leadership signals what's important. But for people to use data, they also have to trust it.
That is non-negotiable. And trust comes from transparency. Some organizations provide open source tools that help create reproducible and credible analytical workflows. But there's one more piece: throughput.
Throughput?
It means that when you collect data for accountability, say from a staff survey, people need to see that it leads to action. Otherwise, it just becomes window dressing and creates cynicism.
So you have to close the loop.
You have to. A great in-practice moment comes from Brazil. After a survey revealed that most federal civil servants had witnessed unethical practices, the Comptroller General publicly committed to using the findings to tackle corruption. That single act reinforced the value of the entire process.
So it's not just about getting the data right. It's about building the culture and systems to make it matter.
That's really the core of it. The journey from data to decisions isn't automatic. It requires a conscious shift away from easy and often misleading metrics toward a richer, more balanced understanding of the world. And beyond that, it demands that leaders build the routines and demonstrate the commitment to turn those insights into meaningful action. It's about making analytics a tool for genuine problem solving, not just another report that sits on a shelf. Over to you, Renos.
Thank you for joining us. You can find the full report on our website. Just follow the link in the description. Be sure to subscribe to be the first to know about upcoming episodes. And before you go, how do you plan to put what you learn into practice? And what topics you'd like us to explore next? We'd love to know. Until then, goodbye.